Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. We serve people who face challenges with prosecution, sentencing, and prison. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. We create digital content and our team offers individual consulting services. We also assist agencies that want to improve outcomes. To learn how we can help you, text the word PrisonPro to 44222. Again, text PrisonPro to 44222 and get our free brochure. You can also visit us at prisonprofessors.com or contact Justin at 818-424-2220. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Send confirmation that you reviewed our podcast and we'll send you a free digital book. Stay tuned for a 20 to 30-minute episode of Prison Professors. Welcome to Prison Professors. I cannot tell you what an honor it is for me to introduce you to a friend and mentor of mine. Today you're going to meet Tulio Cardozo, who was incredibly helpful to me after I got out of prison. I met him because a fellow by the name of Chris Redlitz introduced me. Chris is the founder of The Last Mile, and he told me I've got to meet this amazing guy because I'm going to be learning about computers, and there's nobody better on the planet than Tulio Cardozo. So I walked down to meet him, and I learned that Tulio is also a product of the prison system, and his education came from the prison system. And if he cannot inspire you to use your time wisely, then, well, I'm going to bring him on again because there's nobody better than Tulio Cardozo. Tulio, welcome to Prison Professors. Thanks so much. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what brought you into the criminal justice system?
Sure, Michael. Well, first off, thank you for having me here on the show. It's always an honor and a pleasure. My experience with the prison system started off just like many of the stories you hear about people going to prison. I was a young guy, made some bad choices, made some wrong friendships, and long story short, I ended up finding myself in a room making concentrated cannabis. It was a bit of a graduation from getting stoned when I was 14, starting to sell drugs by the time I was 15, didn't graduate until I was 19, fifth year of high school. And by the time I was 22, I had continued to escalate the things that I did in my criminal activities to find myself in this motel on the side of the 101 in Northern California, making hash oil. And frankly, we blew the place up. It still stood, but we blew the place up making drugs. And I caught a 5-year and 8-month sentence for that. The additional 8 months was for a failure to appear after I was out of the hospital. Of course, I didn't want to get locked up, and I started making drugs again to pay for a lawyer because we all know lawyers cost a lot of money. And long story short, I failed to appear because I kind of realized it wasn't going to work for me. And that's what got me into the prison system. And it's really been an interesting journey to go through the prison system. But initially, that was the whole precipice to my journey.
The cool thing about it is Tulio has a story that shows it's not the bad decisions that you make that are going to define your life, but rather it's how you respond to those decisions. And Tulio responded in such a way that I find to be so extraordinary because while he was in prison, he achieved something that few people even think are possible. And I'd love you to tell us what I'm talking about, Tulio. Tell our audience.
Sure. So, having gone from not having a really proper education, 5 years to graduate high school, here I was in a prison cell, and I decided that, things just got real. I needed a career. I needed to spend the rest of my time while I was incarcerated, and I taught myself as best as I could to learn how to code in computer languages. And my reality...
Wait a minute. Time out, right? You're in prison, and you just dropped a bomb on us. You said that you learned how to code in computer languages. Tell us about the type of computers that you had access to when you were learning how to code in computer languages.
Sure. So at first, I didn't have access to any kind of computer. It was my notebook was a notebook. And eventually I had to graduate, again, up towards something better. And what I ended up doing was taking a job where I could work as a clerk and have access to a keyboard and have access to Microsoft Office, which coincidentally had a program on it called Access. That was the first thing I learned how to read help files about so I could start to write things. And it was definitely a challenge because, in prison, you don't have access to the internet, but what you do have access to is time. And we had this problem where we needed to make the job where the place where I started working had the situation where, they kept track of everything on paper, and a new person came and became in charge of the program, and I reached out to her and I said, hey, look, you're new, I'm new. I don't know too much about computers, but I know that you're doing everything by hand, and if you hire me, maybe we can figure this out together. And that was the journey. I mean, it really was about knowing we had this challenge, figuring out how to help the education department, help other people who were incarcerated. It was less about helping custody, more about helping folks, and helping myself in this whole process. And as I said, I just started reading help files, and I knew this thing was a database somehow. I didn't know how. I never went to school for it really that officially, and I made it work. I taught myself, to the best of my extent, Visual Basic for Application, which is a programming language, and I reached out to other incarcerated individuals, many of whom were doing life in prison, who had never seen the internet, to teach me how to code in this language better than my current understanding of it was. And that's really big, because if you really think about it, here's a guy who's doing life in prison that understood this program better, teaching another guy who's trying to strive to do better, but obviously isn't. And that was my real mentorship. My first time I ever paired program, which is something that many developers do nowadays professionally, and you work with somebody else. One person thinks the problem through while the other one types. And the first time I ever paired program, I was pair programming with a guy doing life in prison, and he had been there for probably 30 years by that point, and who designed the inmate housing system for San Quentin. That was pretty extensive. I was just blown away by the experience.
So there's a lot to be taken in from what Tulio just told us. And one of those questions that I want to ask, I think he already answered, and that is, how do you balance the perception of the inmate culture versus the drive and the desire to become the best in the world at what you can possibly do? Now, Tulio couldn't change the prison culture, but he knew he didn't want to be in prison. He wanted to come home. So instead of getting caught up in politics of, oh, maybe I shouldn't be helping staff or doing something along those lines, he said, wait a minute, I can learn a valuable lesson here, and a lesson that will help me launch my career. And why don't you tell our audience what more you did to develop your understanding of coding and computers and the internet, because you have been so immensely helpful to me since I've come home and building my web presence. And I'm just so inspired by that you were completely self-taught in a prison. So tell us how else you studied.
Yeah. So you hit it on the head in regards to the whole issue with prison culture. How things are perceived is important. And frankly, I never really cared too much about the optics, but I got myself into trouble for certain things one too many times. And I realized really quickly, again, that working towards the betterment of your community is always well regarded, whether you're in prison as an inmate or whether you're in your community as a successful and returned citizen. And my approach was to do the best that I could while I was in prison, to be somebody that I can feel proud about when I went back to my rack and I went to sleep. And I have to be very honest. I found myself while in prison sleeping on a top rack with no money on my books, nothing in my locker. I felt happier there than I had in a long, long time, because for once I was really just proud of myself. And that was something that really drove me through the rest of the challenges that it took to overcome what people thought about that. There's this guy reading computer books on his bed with earplugs and earphones that aren't plugged into anything, just so he could be sitting in quiet thinking through these things. And I really just, what drove me through it, I had a lot of people think I was crazy, but what drove me through it is just being proud of what I was trying to do. And since then, obviously, when you were released, you get a cold splash of reality. And I had to really quickly assess, where is my skill set actually at now that I have access to the rest of the world, and reposition my next steps, which I did go through.
So tell us a little bit about the incubator where you were working when I got out of prison. I met you, I was still in the halfway house. I'd probably been out of jail for maybe no more than 2 weeks or so, when I had an opportunity to walk down to meet you. And I'd like you to tell our audience a little bit about where you were working and what you were doing there.
Sure. So I had reached out to San Quentin State Prison when I was released from an immigration facility out of Arizona. And I explained to them, I really wanted to come back, but not wearing blue, but wearing a shirt like I'm wearing right now, and to contribute to the community, to help folks learn computer programming, those kind of things. And they introduced me to a person who had an incubator. a gentleman named Chris Redlitz, and I met him on campus. I actually went to the prison, had a conversation with him, was sweating and all that kind of stuff, really worried. And it turns out he was one of the partners at Kick Labs, which is a world-class technology incubator that had invested in companies that have done tremendously well. And although I don't want to go through their portfolio, definitely some companies on there that you have heard or has acquired companies that were in his portfolio that are companies that you have absolutely heard. And really, Chris and his wife Beverly gave me an opportunity to take the aspirations that I had and take the drive that got me through my prison experience and give me an opportunity to put it into practice. And, you know, I got to be honest with you, here is a situation where something I didn't know about until recently. I'm on the floor or the mezzanine level directly above where Uber started. And, you know, it's like when Uber was just like 3 guys and this app and, you know, like amazing story of just being around so many successful entrepreneurs, so many successful companies in their infancy that are now huge, many of which bill me for their services or I pay them for their services regularly through subscriptions because they make kick-ass software. And I got to meet a lot of those founders and just bump into them while getting coffee and all those kind of things. So for me, it was like living and working in a magazine in a sense, because it was really like that. And, you know, we were inside of Rocket Space as well, which is a really world-class high-tech facility for co-working space. And you know,
right in the heart of the financial district of San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
And I met with Tulio, and he really took a hands-on approach to helping me understand YouTube, the internet, WordPress. And because of him, I have been able to reach tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. So I really have a debt of gratitude to Tulio for his help. But I'm also really impressed with his commitment to going back into jails and prisons and inspiring more people who are in prison to use their time wisely. And I'd love it if you could tell our audience a little bit about what you're doing now with those skills, what your job is every day.
Yeah. So just as I said earlier, I had wrote a letter or an email to San Quentin about wanting to go back. Basically, a little bit over 5 years later, I walked in through the front doors of San Quentin wearing my state-issued identification. Only this time it wasn't as an inmate, but it was actually as a state of California Department of Corrections.
Hold that up a little closer. I got to see it myself. State of California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
Yeah, and so I get to work.
Put the jacket up on again. Hold on a second. Is that a prison officer's jacket as well?
No, it's not. But okay. I always like to look sharp, brother.
You do.
I always like to look sharp. So I am an accredited employee. I get to work inside of the same prison. I believe I'm the first person in the state of California that works inside of the same prison where I was housed and served my time. I know many officers that I knew as an inmate and now I know as colleagues, coworkers, and I get to contribute meaningfully in the same way that I wish I had, and in the same types of opportunities I only wish I had access to on a daily basis with a nonprofit that's amazing, changed the trajectory of my life, The Last Mile. And I get to teach people. Yes.
Talk about The Last Mile, because a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, they may be in New York, they may be in other parts of the country, and they don't know what The Last Mile is. So let them know about the innovative, disruptive nonprofit that is really changing lives in San Quentin, in Folsom, and really across the United States. What is that nonprofit we're talking about?
Sure. So the nonprofit is The Last Mile. You can check us out at thelastmile.org. And what we're doing is we started off Chris and Beverly teaching an entrepreneurship program to the men inside of San Quentin. And one of the challenges with teaching entrepreneurship is that when guys get out, they want to put these entrepreneurial skills to test and to work. And, you know, skills are good too. And in addition to running companies, like it's great if a person knows the technical ability to execute the thoughts that they had. So what was a natural progression of the Last Mile's programs is they developed a computer programming curriculum in conjunction with the state of California, with Cal PIA, with Chuck Patillo, and they put together a program that started off in San Quentin that actually taught the fundamentals of HTML, JavaScript, more advanced JavaScript, through various tracks with computers, no internet access, and brought in mentors, et cetera, to pump out people who were ready to start working on actual portfolios. And then that's where, at that point, I got super excited. I dropped everything I was doing at that point in my career, and I joined The Last Mile because they were growing a new component to their organization. And this new component was a joint venture with the state of California where private companies, private individuals can have their technology needs completely serviced by people who are incarcerated right now. So the guys who go through the Last Mile's program, the entrepreneurial stuff, the computer coding stuff, now have an opportunity to be able to put into practice the skills that they learned about. And under my leadership, they also have the opportunity to learn strategically how to put these skill sets together, focus them in the right way so that they're doing it in industry standard best practices. And they get to do it. They get to build a CV. They get to build a portfolio. They get to build a resume. They get to build the skills and practice execution inside before they're released. So by the time they get released, they have meaningful work opportunities. They have employers that are already interested in them. They have all of those things and a LinkedIn profile, and they get out and they stay out. At this point, all of our program participants, not a single one has ever come back. And I definitely encourage all of the audience members, if they're interested in that, to look them up on the internet, reach out to us on Twitter, those kind of things. We're always looking for more impact. We're always looking to see what we can do, and we're definitely expanding.
So I got enormous respect for Chris and Beverly and you, Tulio, and all of the amazing people at The Last Mile. But I especially want to give I guess you call it a shout out to people like Chuck Portillo and Secretary Kernan and Albert Rivas and all of the amazing people who had the courage to bring in a meaningful program like The Last Mile so that people who are incarcerated are learning skill sets that can translate into meaningful career opportunities where they're not going to come out and live on the margins, but even in an extremely expensive community like San Francisco can find a job where they can get on their feet and get healthcare insurance and earn a meaningful living to build an awesome life. And there are so many people who have done it. And you are a big part of that, Tulio. Why don't you tell our audience about one of the most high-profile apps or programs that you guys have built inside of San Quentin? It's my understanding that what I'm talking about is related to the Airbnb group.
Yeah. So we built various different applications. I use the term applications loosely, though, because a lot of different web type apps that are what we consider to be telephone apps. And then there's also web apps for web pages. For Airbnb, we did a social media dashboard as an internal tool to measure the engagement across Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. It's a great tool to give them the opportunity to see how the impact of their messaging is resonating with people. If I'm getting the person's name right, Eric Toda was actually we have a quote of him saying that it's even better on mobile. He absolutely loved it, and if I got his name wrong, I'm terribly sorry. We've also done some work for the Coalition for Public Safety, a non-bipartisan legislative group out of Washington, D.C., that is just doing phenomenal work. And we got an opportunity to help build their website. And it was completely a program that we worked very close hand in hand with them, with designers, with our inmate staff that was able to execute on that, and using Node and a Keystone CMS engine, which is definitely a really interesting approach at it. We've also are recently working with the Dave Killer Bread Foundation. So,
another amazing story. I need you to connect me with him so we can get him on the podcast.
Yeah, Dave is an amazing guy. I mean, absolutely inspirational story. I don't want to spoil the surprise for everybody who doesn't know about his story personally, but yeah, he's got an amazing story as far as from a business perspective. He founded a foundation to help other companies that want to learn what it takes to have these successes in their companies too, how to hire somebody that's formerly incarcerated, give them the opportunities, understand what the benefits are, what the tools available for them as employers are, and and how to talk about it, because that's something that maybe is a little, you may not think about it like from an outside perspective, but that messaging is always a critical thing for all larger companies, and definitely don't want to give your shareholders and stakeholders the wrong idea. So that's what some of the things that the foundation does is help employers do that. So we're working with them to help them with their messaging, we'll help them with their platform, and we're releasing a whole new platform. Should be up by the spring of 2018. So depending on when you're listening to this, it may or may not be up. Everything is in transition right now, but do expect bigger things to be rolling out in spring 2018. Those are some of the bigger, more notable names, but we're always working with new and interesting companies and with some state entities. And although I don't want to drop any names until the whole contract is signed, we will be working with another organization here in San Francisco that is helping people to get out and to stay out and be successful and understand the tools and the resources at their disposal. We're going to be working with the state of California directly too, to actually build some apps. So it's really exciting because, like, again, think about it like this. These are folks who are currently incarcerated, and they're helping people who are getting out after being incarcerated to find what they need, find those resources, or they're helping companies who want to help us. I still consider myself in that circle, and want to help us to thrive and to succeed. And I think it's a really great way to give back to the community. And again, it's just terribly, terribly important to me to contribute. This is like why I dropped everything, because if people on this planet are doing that, I want to be a part of it.
And you have had an opportunity as a result of your leadership position with the Last Mile to interact with a lot of high-profile people who've come into San Quentin to tour the amazing facility and the amazing programs. Why don't you tell our audience, just to inspire some of the people who are listening to this in prison, that to show them that there are people that have a big presence and a big profile that will come into prisons and work hard toward prison reform and bringing innovative programs like you have at the Last Mile in San Quentin. Who are some of those notable people?
Sure. So I don't know how many are publicly been displayed or not, but I could certainly say, like, for example, this past week, we had a tremendously impactful visitor. Lance Armstrong actually came in, and he talked to the class and to our joint venture participants about his life and about the experiences of going through those ups and downs, and to rebranding, and to what was it like to go from being Lance Armstrong that everybody loved to the Lance Armstrong that definitely nobody was very kind to on social media, and understanding like what that whole motion is. And if you really think about it, as inmates, you kind of have a similar trajectory in your own process and progression of feelings, from maybe going from this person who you were and the old worn out war stories to who you want to become now, and when life slows down, and just really being okay, and understanding that people have a viewpoint about you maybe coming out, being formerly incarcerated, and there's that stigma, and acknowledging that and figuring out how do you move forward. And Lance had a really interesting take on it. And again, here's a guy who everybody knows his name. There's probably very few people who've never at least heard it.
And you had others like Mark Zuckerberg has toured your facility. What other big celebrities, big names have taken an interest in prison reform and the amazing work that your team at Last Mile are doing?
So shortly before I got there, Valerie Jarrett, the senior advisor for Barack Obama when he was sitting president, she came in, was tremendously impactful on the community. There's just been a lot of people. I mean, to name drop on one hand is fun, but I could just really say that it's.
Well, I can see that you're resistant to do it. I do know that a lot of people have come in and paid attention to the Last Mile, but the reason I want to share it is not so much to name drop, but I want people who are in prison to recognize there are a lot of good people out here who have a deep interest in social injustice and bringing awareness into improving outcomes. It's evident at the Last Mile that Chris Redlitz and Beverly Parenti and Tulio Cardozo and the many other leaders who are there have an interest in people in prison. And we are asking, at Prison Professors, we are asking our audience, people who are incarcerated, to help us. In order for us to get meaningful prison reform and sentence reform through the legislative bodies and through the politics, we need guys coming out like Tulio. You listen to him today, and nobody would ever know that he served a day in prison. He sounds no different from a leader of any other tech startup in Silicon Valley, but he's got a history of serving time just like the rest of us, and that I find incredibly inspiring. And Tulio, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share your inspiring story with us right now. Maybe I'd like that if you could just take these last minutes that we have available on today's podcast and share a message with people who are either going into the prison system or people who are incarcerated right now. What message of hope might you offer them to help them realize that the decisions they make today are going to have a very influential relationship to what they become tomorrow?
I think you again have hit it on the head with the core message there. And I think all of us have a unique individual story. All of us have a unique individual point of view that we're entering the system. So I think it's important just to assess and be objective with yourself and be real with yourself. Set some goals as if you were giving somebody you cared about advice, and realize that that advice is for you, and to make those decisions that are based on your goals and work towards that. It is absolutely possible to make anything happen. Don't rule anything out, and just work at it. You need to get up every day, make the best of your time. It is just as good on the inside as it is on the outside, and keep persevering, because as long as you believe in yourself and you put that meaningful work and those meaningful days that you have opportunity to use, you will make it happen, and people will start to believe in you, and you will continue to make it happen as you get released.
Well, I'm going to ask Tulio to come back onto the Prison Professors program, because he is now involved in something that I find fascinating, and I think many of our listeners will find fascinating, and that is mining cryptocurrencies, a real innovative move. And Tulio, is there any possibility that you could put on we're doing this podcast on both audio and video, but is it possible to use your computer so that our audience could see the mining equipment that you've put together?
Yeah, sure. Well,
how can we do that?
So I have more, and I wasn't quite prepared for this, but I have more. As you can see behind me, I have a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, perfect.
So, those are boxes of equipment. Give me a moment while I...
Yeah. So I'm just so inspired by Tulio, because he is really a self-learner, and he looks at something that's changing the world, and he gets extremely involved in it. What are we looking at right there, Tulio?
So this is one of my crypto miners. It is currently mining away on a currency called Z Classic. This is, I believe, 12 NVIDIA GTX 1070 Ti's. As I said, just churning away. I believe that there's quite a bit of video game fans out there that are probably not too happy with me buying up video cards, but it is what it is, I guess.
You're a businessman now.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put the screen back up. But like as I said earlier, and hopefully that the audio wasn't too disruptive with the fan.
No, that was perfect, and that's all I wanted to show, is that we bring people onto Prison Professors that are authentic, that are the real deal. We never ask anybody to do or say anything that we are not doing. And I will personally testify that Tulio Cardozo is an amazing success story, and I owe him an incredible debt of gratitude for the countless hours he has mentored me on how to use WordPress, the internet, technology. I was in jail for 26 years, and all of it was like, learning a foreign language. But with Tulio's help, I always felt confident that I could get from where I was to where I wanted to go, and I still rely on him today. And Tulio, I really want to thank you for sharing your story with us, and I hope that you'll come back and give us a lesson on cryptocurrencies.
Anytime. I'm actually really, really excited. As always, it's my pleasure, but it is certainly my pleasure to educate anybody in things that I can that fit in both of our wheelhouses, and to contribute in meaningful ways. So my pleasure. I'd love to any day.
Thank you very much. And thanks also to Secretary Kernan, Dr. Brent Choate, Albert Rivas, Chuck Portillo, Chris Redlitz, all the people at California Department of Corrections that bring these amazing programs into San Quentin and other prisons so that people can work toward earning their liberty and helping them come home not as, living on the margins, but rather really ready to function in society. That's what we try and do at Prison Professors is give that message of hope. I am Michael Santos, along with my partners Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. We want to thank you. If you'd like more information on how we try to help people, please visit us at prisonprofessor.com or simply send us a text of Prison Pro to 44222. That's text Prison Pro to 44222, and we will get you some information that reveals how we help. Thank you again. We'll be back tomorrow with another inspiring guest on Prison Professors. Thank you.